Welcome back. In today's explainer, we're diving into a fascinating philosophical mystery straight out of the Mahaparinirvana Sutra. We're talking about a high-stakes intellectual dialogue between Manjushri and the Buddha that completely challenges how we think about truth, words, and context. So let's just jump right in. Section 1. The Buddha's verse, Absolute Truth or Trap. Okay, we're kicking things off with a pretty startling statement made by the Buddha. Normally, right, we expect universal, unshakable truths from an omniscient teacher, but listen to this specific quote. The Buddha actually states, "All rivers bend, all forests are trees, all women are deceitful, all who are free are happy." I mean, just hearing that, it sounds incredibly rigid, doesn't it? It basically takes the massive complexities of the real world and crams them into neat little absolute boxes. So looking at these absolute statements, we really have to ask ourselves, did the Buddha just make a massive, easily disprovable logical error? I mean, how could a figure revered for supreme wisdom make statements that are so obviously generalized and, well, frankly, incorrect? Which brings us to Section 2, Manjushri's doubt, questioning absolutes. Enter the challenger, Manjushri. As you likely know, in Buddhist philosophy, Manjushri is literally the embodiment of wisdom. And staying completely true to his nature, he doesn't just accept these blanket statements blindly. Instead, he systematically dismantles the Buddha's claims. On one hand, you have the Buddha's absolute statements, but then Manjushri brings up these brilliant counterexamples. He points out that actually, not all rivers bend. Take the Suvastu River, which flows perfectly straight into the Western Sea. And not all forests are made of trees. What about the heavenly realms with forests made entirely of gold, silver, and lapis lazuli? And he doesn't stop at geography. Manjushri just keeps poking holes in the logic. He points out that obviously not all women are deceitful, noting that there are countless virtuous women who strictly keep ethical precepts and possess immense compassion. Finally, he notes that even those who seem quote-unquote free, like kings or heavenly gods, still face the ultimate sorrow of impermanence and death. So their freedom absolutely does not equal unending happiness. Basically, Manjushri completely unravels the logic of the Buddha's verse here. Let's look at Section 3. What is with Thrimulder? This whole Socratic sparring match between them leads to a huge reveal. The Buddha wasn't just making a mistake. He was actually setting a trap to teach us something much, much deeper about the nature of communication itself. Here, the Buddha introduces the core concept of teachings with remainder. What this means is that a teaching is provisional. It has a specific, highly targeted meaning that depends entirely on its context. It's not some absolute, universal fact meant for everyone across all of time. It's an incomplete truth designed to do a very specific job. Moving on to Section 4, Contextual Teaching. To explain exactly why he uses these provisional teachings, rather than just speaking absolute, unvarnished truth all the time, the Buddha uses a genuinely brilliant medical analogy. Think of a highly skilled doctor evaluating a sick patient. That doctor might prescribe a sweet, healing nectar. But, and this is the absolutely crucial point, if that patient takes an overdose, or if that nectar is given to someone with a completely different illness, that exact same life-saving medicine turns into a deadly poison. Through this analogy, the Buddha is basically explaining that he acts as the ultimate spiritual physician. He didn't state those verses about rivers bending or forests being trees as universal laws of physics, not at all. He prescribed them as highly targeted medicine for specific spiritual diseases. Every single word is a calculated dose. And this builds such a fascinating map of context. Remember that verse about all rivers bending? Well, it turns out that was specifically spoken to subdue the extreme arrogance of King Prasenajit in his royal court. And the verse about not viewing others' faults? That was targeted medicine for King Ajatashatru, who had committed the horrifying crime of murdering his own father and was desperately trying to deflect his guilt outward. And the verse about how all fear weapons? That wasn't some biological absolute. It was just meant to inspire compassion in a specific deer hunter the Buddha happened to encounter. With all of this context revealed, the Buddha, referred to here as the Tathagata, confidently asserts that his words aren't mistakes at all. They have absolutely no errors or omissions because they are perfectly calculated, context-dependent tools. And this is exactly why almost all spoken teachings, all words, all doctrines have quote-unquote remainder. They're carefully adapted to the listener's ear, exactly like medicine adapted to a patient's body.
Throughout the text, Manjushri keeps throwing out examples of statements that seem confusing or contradictory, and the Buddha just keeps revealing the highly specific, hidden psychological context behind every single one of them. Whether it was explaining freedom to a woman named Bhadra who was feeling restricted by societal norms, or literally redefining the word parents as metaphorical ignorance just to jolt a listener's perspective, it's all bespoke medicine.
Let's head into Section 5, Ultimate Without Remainder. Now, this brings up a massive foundational question, one that is asked by the Bodhisattva Kashyapa. Think about it. If everything is just a contextual tool, if all words are just medicine that can change depending entirely on who is listening, does an absolute truth actually exist? Does a truth without remainder even exist? Or is literally everything just relative? Well, the Buddha reveals that the truth without remainder, the absolute, unchangeable reality, does in fact exist. But here's the catch. It isn't a clever phrase. It isn't a written rule. It is the eternal, blissful, good Dharma itself. It's the actual lived state of ultimate reality and liberation, completely free from the constraints of language. This side-by-side comparison really perfectly captures the dual nature of reality in this philosophy. On one side, we have teachings with remainder. That's the flexible, messy, practical world of words, arguments, and medicine. It constantly changes based on who needs to hear it. But on the other side, we have teachings without remainder. That is the absolute, eternal truth that applies universally to all beings, but which can barely be captured by words at all. The Buddha firmly establishes that words, rules, and analogies are always provisional. They're like rafts used to cross a river. They aren't the shore itself. Only the ultimate state of liberation, the eternal good Dharma, is absolute. Literally everything else we say, argue, or declare leaves a remainder. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with this final thought. We live in a world that is frankly obsessed with absolute statements, rigid arguments, and universally applied rules. But this ancient dialogue asks us to look a little deeper. The next time you hear an absolute claim, or maybe you find yourself fiercely defending one, just ask yourself, is this really the ultimate truth without remainder? Or is it just medicine meant for a specific patient at a specific time?